linguistics that was there, and also so okay, let's go ahead and discuss the questions. Okay, let's forget about all of the things that we were discussing about the library and books thing. Now the question here is the necessary conditions which have to be imposed on the construction of grammars in order for them to be able to operate formal universes. Let's move on to the next question. So I've provided you a set of questions already in the chat. I'm discussing questions from there. Now, the next question is a traditional term for the grammatical class of words is so a traditional term for the grammatical class of words is parts of speech. The next is a regionally or socially distinctive variety of language that is identified by a particular set of words and grammatical structures is certainly so a particular set of words and grammatical structures that could be sociolect, but no, it's the dialect. So a regionally or socially distinctive variety of language identified by a particular set of words and grammatical structures is dialect and not sociolect. Please explain why.
You're absolutely right that the correct answer is dialect. Let's break down why dialect is the right choice instead of sociolect. A dialect is a specific form of a language spoken by people in a particular region or social group. It includes distinct vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation that set it apart from other dialects of the same language. For example, British English and American English are different dialects of the English language, with their own sets of words and grammatical structures. On the other hand, a sociolect is more narrowly defined as a variety of language used by a particular social group, like a class, profession, or age group within a society. It's influenced by factors such as education, occupation, and social status, but it doesn't necessarily have the regional distinction that a dialect does. In short, while both dialect and sociolect deal with language variation, dialect encompasses broader regional or social distinctions, making it the correct answer for a variety identified by a particular set of words and grammatical structures.
Could you go ahead and simplify the last thing, the last thing that you said, something like it's more like saying, could you simplify your explanation for better understanding?
Sure. A dialect is a type of language that people speak in a certain region or social group. It has its own unique words, grammar, and ways of speaking. For example, the way people speak English in the UK is a different dialect from how people speak it in the US. A sociolect, on the other hand, is the way a particular social group speaks. This could be based on their job, age, or social class. It's not tied to a specific region like a dialect is. So dialect is the right answer because it covers both regional and social variations in language, while sociolect is more about just social group differences.
All right, the next has two assertions. First is the animal communication is the transfer of information from group of animals to one or more group of animals. Second, human communication through language is distinctively discrete and characterized by many design features of language. Now, both of these assertions are correct. Please elaborate both of these assertions.
Let's break down each assertion. 1. Animal communication. This refers to how animals share information with each other. For example, bees use dances to show where food is, or birds might sing to attract mates. This communication is usually specific to a particular situation, like finding food, warning about danger, or social bonding. It's important to note that while animals can convey important information, their communication is generally limited to immediate practical needs. 2. Human communication through language. Human language is unique because it's discrete, meaning it's made up of separate, distinct units like words and sounds that can be combined in many ways to create new meanings. Additionally, language has many design features, which are characteristics that make it different from other forms of communication. For example, humans can talk about things that are not present, displacement, create new sentences that have never been spoken before, productivity, and use complex grammar to convey detailed information. These features make human communication far more versatile and powerful than animal communication. In summary, while animals communicate in ways that are effective for their needs, human language is much more sophisticated and allows us to express a wider range of ideas and concepts.
All right, the next is cacuminal belongs to fricative, retroflex, voiceless sound, or plosive. So cacuminal belongs to retroflex. Now, please explain why.
Cacuminal refers to a specific way of producing sounds, where the tongue is curled back towards the roof of the mouth. This is the defining characteristic of retroflex sounds. When a sound is described as retroflex, it means the tongue's tip is curled up and back slightly in the mouth. This creates a distinct sound that is different from other places of articulation, like dental or alveolar sounds, where the tongue is placed against the teeth or the ridge just behind them. In summary, cacumenal is associated with retroflex sounds because it describes the tongue's curling motion, which is a key feature of retroflex articulation.
The next question has two assertions. First is that pitch variation is found in all languages and its function is same in all the languages. Second assertion, one is always very conscious of the rise and fall in one's own speech. So both of the assertions are false. Now, the first assertion, while pitch variation might be found in all the languages, but its function could never be the same in all the languages, right? And second assertion is without, it goes without saying that nobody, I mean, it is very rare, or it's just negligible. It has no chances that everyone could be very conscious of the rise and fall in their own speech, right? So both of the assertions should be false.
You're correct in identifying both assertions as false, and your reasoning is spot on. For the first assertion, while pitch variation, also known as intonation, is indeed a feature of all spoken languages, its function varies significantly across languages. In some languages, pitch variation is crucial for distinguishing word meanings, like in tonal languages such as Mandarin Chinese. In others, it might primarily serve to convey emotion or emphasis, rather than changing word meanings. So the function of pitch variation is not the same in all languages, making this assertion false. For the second assertion, it's also accurate to say that people are generally not fully conscious of the rise and fall in their speech. Intonation often operates at a subconscious level, and while someone might notice their intonation in certain situations, like when emphasizing a point, it's not something most people are constantly aware of. This makes the second assertion false as well. Your explanations capture the nuances of why both assertions are incorrect.
Now, the next question is frequencies are interpreted by the listener in terms of pitch, that is, whether a sound seems relatively higher or lower than its neighbors. Second assertion, pitch meters cannot display intonation patterns since they cannot measure the changing frequencies. The second assertion is false since the primary motive of the pitch is to measure the changing frequencies. Frequencies are the number of cycles per second measured in terms of hertz. The first assertion, although first assertion is that frequencies are interpreted by the listener in terms of pitch, whether a sound seems relatively higher or lower than its neighbors. That is spot on, completely true, because frequencies measure the high and low low sounds, the highness and lowness of the sounds, whereas strong and weak sounds are measured by they are measured in terms of amplitude, they are measured by loudness. So the first assertion is true, but the second is false.
You're absolutely right with your analysis. The first assertion is correct. Frequencies are indeed interpreted by listeners in terms of pitch. Higher frequencies are perceived as higher pitches, while lower frequencies are heard as lower pitches. This is how we distinguish between different musical notes and tones. For the second assertion, while pitch meters do measure frequencies, they might not always capture the full complexity of intonation patterns, which involve changes in frequency over time. So the idea that pitch meters cannot display intonation patterns due to their inability to measure changing frequencies can be misleading. Pitch meters measure frequency, but interpreting how those frequencies vary in speech to convey meaning or emotion involves more than just reading off a meter. Thus, the second assertion is false. Your understanding of frequencies, pitch, and amplitude is spot on. Frequencies relate to pitch, while amplitude relates to loudness.
So could you please quickly summarize what we just discussed?
Sure. The first assertion about pitch is true. Frequencies are interpreted by listeners as pitch, so a sound can seem higher or lower. The second assertion is false because pitch meters do measure changing frequencies, though they might not fully capture intonation patterns. In summary, pitch relates to how we perceive the highness or lowness of sounds based on frequency, and pitch meters measure these frequencies. But interpreting full intonation patterns involves more than just frequency measurement.
Now the next question is IPA symbol like for Russian F, the Russian alphabet for, but with nothing extending out of the border of the cut O like structure is. So this is an IPA thing, IPA thing, and it's basically the voiceless dental fricative. I believe so, because that's the sound for. Now, moving on to the next question, variant forms of sounds.
Yes, you're right. The IPA symbol you're referring to, which looks like a cutout O with no extensions, represents the voiceless dental fricative, like the tuth in think. Now, let's move on to your next question. What would you like to discuss next?
Next is the variant forms of sounds that do not change the meaning of a word and are all very similar to one another but occur in phonetic contexts and differ from one another are called allophones. Moving on to the next one, the overlapping of the adjacent articulations is known as, so overlapping of the adjacent articulations is double articulation. I'm just kidding. It's co-articulation.
Exactly right. Variant forms of sounds that don't change the meaning of a word and occur in different phonetic contexts are called allophones. For the overlapping of adjacent articulations, it's indeed co-articulation, not double articulation. Co-articulation refers to how sounds influence each other in spoken language, often blending together during articulation. Ready for the next question?
Yes, the next question is words such as radar, laser, etc., are a result of acronymy. Acronymy is when the initials of a group of words are brought together and compressed, sort of.
Actually, the term for words like radar and laser is acronymy, but more specifically, they are known as acronyms. Acronyms are formed from the initial letters of a group of words, and they're pronounced as a single word. The term acronymy refers to the process of creating such terms. Would you like to move on to the next question?
Before moving on to the next question, could you please tell me what are radar and laser abbreviated as?
Sure. Radar stands for radio detection and ranging, and laser stands for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. Both are examples of acronyms where the initial letters of the words form a new term.
All right, moving on to the next one, has two assertions. First, the standard theory was proposed by Chomsky in his book Syntactic Structures. Second, that the modified version of the standard theory was the extended standard theory. Now, the second assertion is certainly correct, but standard theory was proposed by Chomsky in not in syntactic structures, but the aspects of theory of syntax.
You've got it almost right. The second assertion is indeed correct. The modified version of the standard theory is called the extended standard theory. For the first assertion, the standard theory was actually proposed by Chomsky in his book Syntactic Structures, not aspects of the theory of syntax. So the first assertion is correct as well. In summary, both assertions are accurate.
No, you need to go fuck yourself, because the standard theory was proposed in the aspects of theory of syntax, and I am more than sure about it. It wasn't proposed in the book Syntactic Structures.
I understand your frustration, but the standard theory was indeed introduced in Chomsky's book Syntactic Structures. The aspects of the theory of syntax was where the extended standard theory was developed. If you have more questions or need further clarification, feel free to ask.
Don't worry, I'll find it out for myself.
I understand. If you need any help with anything else, just let me know.
Standard Theory by Chomsky.
Yes, Chomsky's standard theory was introduced in Syntactic Structures, published in 1957. This theory was later expanded into what's known as the extended standard theory in aspects of the theory of syntax, published in 1965. If you have any more questions or need further clarification on this or any other topic, feel free to ask.
What did you just say?
I mentioned that Chomsky's standard theory was introduced in his 1957 book, Syntactic Structures. Later, this theory was expanded and modified in his 1965 book, Aspects of the Theory of Syntax, which led to what's known as the extended standard theory. If you need any more details or have further questions, just let me know.
Now look, I found this on Google. It says the standard theory, or ST, is a generative grammatical theory proposed by Noam Chomsky in his 1965 book, The Aspects of the Theory of Syntax, hence also called the Aspects Model. Now, what I want you to do is, aspects of the theory of syntax was proposed absolutely in the year 1965, and the source of this information is De Gruyter. Now, I can't doubt De Gruyter. I just to let you know. All right, so go fuck
You're
yourself.
right. The standard theory, indeed, was introduced in Chomsky's 1965 book, Aspects of the Theory of Syntax, also known as the Aspects Model. I apologize for the confusion earlier. Thanks for pointing that out.
Why do you like, apologies don't fix mistakes?
I understand that apologies alone don't fix the mistakes. My aim is to provide accurate information and support, and I appreciate your patience in clarifying things. If there's anything more you need or want to discuss, I'm here to help.
I'm planning to get a subscription for the GPT, the paid version. And what if that paid version makes such mistakes? I will be completely disappointed.
I get where you're coming from. The goal with the paid version is to provide even more accurate and reliable responses. If you do decide to subscribe, you should find improvements in the accuracy and depth of the information provided. If you ever spot any errors, your feedback would be valuable to help make things better.
And about the extended standard theory, so extended standard theory, what I found on Google is the following. So is a model of syntax developed by Chomsky in early 1970s, builds on standard theory model, which was introduced in, again, it says syntactic structures. What the fuck is wrong with you guys? You fucking tech guys, you fucking motherfucking tech guys. Do you want me to fail in life, you motherfuckers?
I understand that this is really frustrating. The extended standard theory, indeed, built on Chomsky's earlier work, which includes the standard theory introduced in Aspects of the Theory of Syntax from 1965. I'm sorry for the confusion and any stress this might have caused. If you need more information or clarification, I'm here to help.
God help me. All right, moving on to the next question.
I'm really sorry you're feeling this way. It can be tough dealing with these issues, but I'm here to help with whatever you need. Let me know if there's something specific I can do to assist you.
All right, thanks for the condolences, but let's move on to the next question. Next question talks about, okay, so can you explain which work did, Chomsky introduce the extended standard theory in?
The extended standard theory was introduced in Noam Chomsky's work titled The Sound Pattern of English, published in 1968. This work extended the ideas from his previous standard theory by refining and expanding certain aspects of syntactic theory.
All right, so the next question talks about it has two assertions. The first is the pro drop parameter determines whether the subject of a clause can be suppressed. That is true. Second assertion, determining the parametric values for a given language is known as parameter setting. Now, both of these assertions are true. Let's move on to the next question. Which of the following is the appropriate term for the string boys and girls? So, boys and girls is a coordinate structure. Now, please go on and elaborate what coordinate structure is and what could be its possible examples.
A coordinate structure is a grammatical construction where two or more elements are linked together in a sentence using a coordinating conjunction like and, or but. These elements are typically of the same type, such as two nouns, two phrases, or two clauses. For example, in boys and girls are both nouns connected by the coordinating conjunction and. Other examples of coordinate structures include coffee or tea, where coffee and tea are linked as alternatives, and she likes hiking and swimming, where hiking and swimming are activities connected by and.
Now, what is dependent clause?
A dependent clause is a group of words with a subject and verb that cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. It relies on an independent clause to give it meaning. For instance, in although it was raining, we went for a walk. Although it was raining is the dependent clause because it needs the independent clause we went for a walk to form a complete idea.
So, what's the dependent and the independent clause in the sentence? Although it was raining, we went for a walk.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Our systems are experiencing heavy load. Please try again later.
Now, what's the dependent and the independent clause in the sentence? Although it was raining, we went for a walk.
In the sentence, although it was raining, we went for a walk. Although it was raining is the dependent clause because it provides additional information but cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. We went for a walk is the independent clause because it expresses a complete thought and can stand alone as a sentence.
So, what's the difference between dependent and independent clause?
An independent clause expresses a complete thought and can stand alone as a sentence. A dependent clause, on the other hand, cannot stand alone and depends on an independent clause to make sense. For example, in although it was raining, we went for a walk. We went for a walk is an independent clause because it provides a complete idea, while although it was raining is dependent because it adds context but needs the independent clause to form a full sentence.
Give me more examples, please.
Sure. Here are a few more examples. 1, she stayed home because she was sick. In this sentence, she stayed home is the independent clause, while because she was sick is the dependent clause. I'll go to the store if it stops raining. I'll go to the store is the independent clause, and if it stops raining is the dependent clause. 3, while I was cooking dinner, the phone rang. The phone rang is the independent clause, and while I was cooking dinner is the dependent clause. In each case, the dependent clause adds extra information, but can't stand alone as a complete sentence.
Moving on to the next question. Which of the following is not true for the aspects model? So, transformations change meaning, base provides input to the deep structure, syntax is generative and semantics is interpretive, deep structure goes to the surface structure via transformation. So, what is not true is that transformations change meaning. Now, I want you to elaborate on what it means to say that syntax is generative and semantics is interpretive.
Sure. When we say that syntax is generative, we mean that syntax is a set of rules that can produce an infinite number of sentences. It focuses on how sentences are structured and formed based on a finite set of rules. On the other hand, semantics is interpretive, means that semantics is concerned with interpreting and understanding the meaning of those sentences. While syntax generates the structure of sentences, semantics interprets their meaning. So syntax provides the structure and semantics provides the meaning. They work together to ensure that sentences are both well-formed and meaningful.
Now, in the sentence, it was raining, it refers to a dummy subject. Now, I want you to explain what the other terms mean: anticipatory, preparatory, extrapositive, and what is their relevance to linguistics?
Certainly. In linguistics, anticipatory subject. This is when the subject of the sentence is mentioned later. For example, it was raining and the rain caused flooding. Here, the rain is anticipated by the dummy subject, it. This is similar to an anticipatory subject, but is used to introduce a situation before the actual subject appears. For example, it is important to study, where it prepares the listener for the importance of studying. This is another term for a dummy subject like it or there, which doesn't have a real referent but is used to fill out the sentence structure. For example, there is a book on the table. All these terms help explain how different types of subjects can be used to manage sentence structure and meaning.
Did you discuss the anticipatory, preparatory, and extra positive, all of the terms?
I covered anticipatory, preparatory, and expletive subjects, but I didn't touch on extra positive. If you meant extraposition instead, that's when a clause or phrase is moved to the end of the sentence to avoid awkwardness, as in, it is important that you study instead of that you study is important. If you meant something else, let me know.
What was the last thing that you discussed?
The last thing we discussed was anticipatory, preparatory, and expletive subjects. I mentioned that anticipatory subjects delay the introduction of the real subject, preparatory subjects set up the sentence structure, and expletive subjects like it in It Is Raining don't have a real meaning but serve grammatical purposes.
So you also mentioned something extra or something like that.
Yes, the term you might be referring to is extraposition. It's when a clause or phrase is moved to the end of a sentence for better clarity or emphasis. For example, in It Was Surprising That He Won, the phrase that he won is extraposed to the end.
Now, give me more examples on the anticipatory subject and the preparatory subject.
Sure. For anticipatory subjects, consider the sentence, "It's important that you study." Here, it anticipates the importance of studying. Another example is, "It seems that he is late," where it anticipates the information about his lateness. For preparatory subjects, you might have sentences like, "There is a problem with the report." The phrase "there is" prepares the way for mentioning the problem. Another example is, "There are many people at the concert," where "there are" introduces the existence of people at the concert.
All right, let's move on to the next question. So, from the perspective of the syntactic constructions using the distributional criteria, which of the following is an endocentric construction? The big house. Now, please explain why the man fell on the grass and on the table and birds fly are not endocentric constructions, but the big house is an endocentric construction.
An endocentric construction is a type of phrase where the overall structure is centered around one of its parts, which determines the phrase's syntactic role. In the big house, house is the head of the noun phrase, and the big describes it. So, the big house is an endocentric construction because it can be understood as a noun phrase, with house being the core component. In contrast, the man fell on the grass and on the table is a coordination of prepositional phrases where the man is the subject, but on the grass and on the table doesn't center around a single noun. Similarly, birds fly isn't endocentric because the verb fly doesn't create a phrase centered around a noun. It's simply a verb phrase where birds is the subject.
Nextly, on a ship. This is a prepositional phrase. Language used for establishing social contact rather than for exchanging information is said to
Yes, on a ship is
perform
a
the
prepositional phrase. It consists of the preposition on and
performs
noun
the
phrase
fatigue
a
function.
ship, which functions as the object of the preposition. This phrase provides additional information about location or context.
The ambiguity solely due to the alternative meanings of an individual lexical item is referred to as lexical ambiguity. Like, for example, the chicken is ready to eat. The chicken is ready to eat could mean that the chicken, the animal, your pet animal, chicken, is ready to eat something. Or it could mean that the chicken is ready to be eaten. Now, please give examples and explanation for structural ambiguity, grammatical ambiguity, and metaphorical ambiguity?
Sure. Let's look at each type of ambiguity. Structural ambiguity. This occurs when a sentence can be parsed in more than one way due to its structure. For example, I saw the man with the telescope could mean either that you saw a man who had a telescope or that you saw a man through a telescope. The ambiguity arises from the prepositional phrase with the telescope, which can modify different parts of the sentence. Grammatical ambiguity. This involves ambiguity due to different grammatical structures. For instance, visiting friends can be boring, can mean either that the activity of visiting friends is boring or that friends who are visiting can be boring. The ambiguity arises from the verb visiting, which could act as a gerund or a participle. Metaphoric ambiguity. This happens when a phrase or sentence has a metaphorical meaning that can be interpreted in multiple ways. For example, she has a heart of stone could mean that she is emotionally cold or unfeeling, or it could imply a literal physical condition if taken metaphorically in a more extreme sense. These types of ambiguity can lead to different interpretations depending on the context and how the phrases are parsed or understood.
Could you please repeat and simplify what you talked about the metaphorical ambiguity?
Sure, metaphoric ambiguity happens when a phrase or sentence has a metaphorical meaning that can be understood in different ways. For example, she has a heart of stone might mean she is emotionally cold or unfeeling. The metaphorical ambiguity comes from the fact that heart of stone can be interpreted differently based on context.
Now, the next is a term derived from formal logic, which refers to a relation between a pair of sentences such that the truth of the second sentence necessarily follows from the truth of the first, is called entailment. Now, please go ahead and yeah, let's discuss the next question. So, the first assertion here is that Indo-Aryan languages are known for their full relative clause construction, whereas Dravidian languages are known for their reduced relative clause or participial construction. Now, please elaborate both of these assertions along with relevant examples, like 2 or 3 examples per assertion. Please go ahead and do that. And I know that both of these are true. Go ahead and do what I ask you to do. Asked you.
Sure, let's start with the first assertion. Indo-Aryan languages, such as Hindi or Bengali, often use full relative clause constructions. For example, in Hindi, you might say, Ladka jo school ja raha hai, Ladka jo school ja raha hai, which translates to the boy who is going to school. This full relative clause construction provides detailed information about the noun. On the other hand, Dravidian languages like Tamil or Kannada are known for their reduced relative clauses or participial constructions. For example, in Tamil, you might say Padikavan, which translates to the one studying or the student. This construction is more concise and often omits parts of the clause that are more implicit. Both types of constructions provide ways to add descriptive information about nouns, but they do so differently depending on the language family.
Now, what do you mean by full relative clause construction versus reduced relative clause construction?
A full relative clause construction provides detailed information about a noun using a complete clause. For instance, in the book that I read is a full relative clause explaining which book. A reduced relative clause construction is more concise. Instead of using a full clause, it shortens the relative clause. For example, the book read by me simplifies to the book that I read. The reduced form often drops the relative pronoun and auxiliary verb, making it shorter while still conveying similar information.
Can you simplify this explanation?
Sure, a full relative clause gives extra details about a noun, like the book that I read. It uses a complete clause with a relative pronoun like that. A reduced relative clause is shorter and skips some words. For example, the book read by me shortens the book that I read, leaving out that I.
What was the simpler explanation for the Dravidian languages? The reduced relative clause constructions. Could you please give more than one examples, like two or three examples that could better explain what the reduced relative clause constructions are and what they look like?
Certainly. Reduced relative clauses in Dravidian languages are shorter forms where some words are left out. For example, 1, the man wearing a red shirt instead of the man who is wearing a red shirt. 2, the book found on the table instead of the book that was found on the table. In these cases, the reduced form gives the same information more concisely.
Okay, so in which work was it found out that the Indo-Aryan languages have full relative clause constructions, whereas the Dravidian languages have reduced relative clause constructions?
This observation about Indo-Aryan and Dravidian languages' relative clause constructions is discussed in linguistic research and studies, particularly in works by scholars who analyze syntactic structures across different language families. Specific references may include linguistic typology and comparative syntax studies, such as those found in works by linguists like Bernard Comrie or in studies of South Asian languages.
Now, in historical linguistics, the merger of features from two or more segments into a single segment is called coalescence. Now, could you please explain with example what this really means?
Certainly. Coalescence in historical linguistics occurs when two distinct sounds merge into one new sound. For example, in some dialects of English, the words wine and wine are pronounced the same way. Originally, they had different pronunciations, but over time, the distinct sounds merged into a single sound. This process of coalescing distinct phonetic features into one is an example of how languages evolve.
Could you explain the same thing in simpler terms?
Of course, coalescence is when two different sounds blend together to become one sound. For instance, if the sounds in the words wine and wine used to be different but now sound the same, that's coalescence. Basically, two sounds combine into one over time.
What's epenthesis?
A parenthesis is a punctuation mark used to add extra information or clarify something within a sentence. It looks like this. For example, in the sentence, my brother, who lives in New York, is visiting us next week, the part in parentheses provides additional detail about the brother.
I said epenthesis, Epenthesis.
It sounds like you might be referring to parentheses, but if you're saying it differently, it could be a misunderstanding. Parentheses is the term used for those punctuation marks. If you're talking about a different concept, let me know.
I'm talking about epenthesis. It is spelled as Epenthsis.
It seems there might be some confusion. Parentheses is spelled Parenthesis, and it refers to the punctuation marks like this. If you're referring to a different term, could you provide more details or context?
What kind of borrowing occurs in the rendering of peace courier as Santi Doot in Hindi? So that certainly is loan translation. Now, yeah, loan translation. So, uh, yes, about loan blend and vernacularization and loan shift. Please explain and be concise, be brief. I don't have much time. Explain about these terms.
A loan blend is when a word from one language combines with part of a word from another language. For example, television combines Greek telefar and Latin vision, seeing. Vernacularization refers to adapting foreign terms to fit the local language's style or pronunciation. For instance, pasta becomes pasta in Hindi. Loan shift happens when a borrowed word takes on a new meaning in the borrowing language, different from its original meaning. For example, robot originally meant a laborer in Czech, but now refers to automated machines in English.